Welcome to Dashing Dish. We're keeping it simple today with recipes that have just 6 ingredients or less. My sister Emily will join me as we prepare breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For breakfast, we're having baked oatmeal cookie bars, packed with protein, which is satisfying and delicious, and a great way to start the day. If you find yourself tempted by takeout for lunch, I'm whipping up a 15-minute savory chicken and broccoli recipe that is sure to hit the spot. Dinner includes a favorite. Look no further than this mouth-watering spaghetti squash pizza bake that can be personalized with all of your favorite pizza toppings. Let's not leave out dessert. We have delicious low-carb chocolate chip cookies on the menu, sure to satisfy any sweet tooth with only 1 gram of sugar. Today we're keeping it simple with just 6 ingredients or less. So I'm going to get started on my baked oatmeal cookie bars, and these are not only simple, but they're absolutely delicious. They taste almost like a warm oatmeal cookie that you would have for breakfast. And yes, I said breakfast because these are technically a breakfast bar. They kind of replace your morning bowl of oatmeal in a really delicious way. So I'm going to start by adding my dry ingredients to a bowl. This is really simple. It's all about simple today. So we have a 1/2 cup of oat flour. So oat flour, if you haven't heard of it before, is basically just old-fashioned oats, which we have here, and you grind it into a flour in your food processor or your blender. So you can just make it right at home. You can also buy it. Then we have a 1.5 cups of old-fashioned oats, and this is what we think of when we think of our morning bowl of oatmeal. But like I said, this is a more, I think, delicious spin on just a morning bowl of oatmeal because it tastes just like a cookie. Then a 1/4 cup of sweetener. I have monk fruit sweetener here, but you can use any kind of sweetener you like. So basically, when it comes to sweetener, the thing that I look for is either a raw sugar, coconut sugar, or a more natural form of sugar. So I like stevia and monk fruit sweetener in my recipes, but you can use anything that you have at home. Then 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and this gives it that oatmeal cookie flavor. 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And this just helps these bars rise just as you would want a cookie to do. So I like to make these, and I like to have them usually before my workout in the morning. So what I'll do is I'll make these ahead of time. I'll pop them into individual bags, just the bars, in my freezer, and then I'll have them before my workout. Then, after I work out, I have a protein shake or a smoothie, so something that kind of replenishes me and refuels me for my day. But this is a great little start to the day and also gives me energy to get started on my workout. So then I'm going to add the wet ingredients. So I just mixed the dry ingredients, and that's usually like how I like to bake. I just like to add the dry ingredients first, then the wet, and then just mix it all into the same bowl. It's way less dishes in the end. So 2 eggs, and then I'm going to add one of my favorite ingredients in this recipe, my peanut butter. But if you don't have peanut butter, or you prefer almond butter, you could do any kind of nut butter for this recipe. So usually whenever I'm measuring out any kind of nut butter, what I like to do is I like to microwave it for about 30 seconds just so that it's really easy to kind of pour out and add to the recipe. But if you have a natural form of peanut butter, usually it's already pretty loose, so it's easy to stir in. So we have 1/2 cup of any kind of nut butter that you like. And that's also a really good healthy fat. So that's great to add when you're making your breakfast for the morning. Is look for ways that you can add protein, healthy fat, good sources of nutrition to get you started on your day. Then we're gonna do 1/2 cup of maple syrup, and this adds a little bit of sweetness because we only did a 1/4 cup of sweetener, so we want it to be a little bit more sweet, but it also makes these bars bake up perfectly. So whenever you're baking, you kind of want to think about your wet ingredients and your dry ingredients, and it's just a science. So if you ever don't have something on hand, let's say you don't have maple syrup, you can always use honey in place of it. So as long as you kind of follow those rules of the baking wet and dry ingredient ratio, then you can pretty much make any recipe your own. So I'm just gonna stir this all together. And a lot of times what I like to do is, like I said, I like to pop these in my freezer, but if I don't have something in my freezer, I like to at least have some kind of no-bake ball or some kind of really quick and easy treat that I can have first thing in my day that I know that I made, so I know what's in it. And then for lunch, I like to do something that's really quick and easy, like a 15-minute meal or a salad or a wrap, something that's really quick. And then dinner is something that I like to really take time to sit down and enjoy and plan ahead and prepare. So now I'm just gonna pour this into a 9x9 baking pan. And you're just gonna kind of use your spoon to smooth it out. And you can see how simple this was, just 6 ingredients. Now, whenever I talk about 6 ingredients or less, what I'm really saying is not counting the spices, because my spices for my recipes are so simple. So we really just have eggs, nut butter, syrup, and then oats and sweetener. That's all you need for this recipe. So simple. And then I'm gonna do just some chocolate chips, and you could measure these out. It calls for 1/3 cup, or you can kind of just sprinkle them on top like this, which I like to do because then you can get them all evenly placed on there, and you get a few extra, I think. And then we're gonna bake this at 350 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes until a toothpick comes out clean, and they'll be ready to cut and store in our fridge or freezer for a busy week.
I think we all have a story that we can reflect back on when we think about a time that we were overly overwhelmed. And it typically makes for a story that starts with tears and ends with laughter as we look back and reminisce. That all too crazy moment took place for me when I was 9 months pregnant. It began with me sobbing in an explosion of cranberry sauce, and now thankfully I can look back and laugh. Being the planner that I am, I tend to make my recipes months in advance, but being 9 months pregnant, in my all-time planning mode, I went into overdrive as I started making holiday recipes in the month of June. It wasn't long before our smoke detector sensed that our kitchen was in overdrive, which meant blaring alarms, and of course, the dog barking followed suit. Before I could do anything about the smoke alarms, I smelled something burning, and I saw that my lasagna, which was a labor of love, was burnt to a crisp, so I quickly went in and grabbed it out of the oven. Meanwhile, I burnt my arm on the oven rack. And just as I was running my arm under cool water, my water for the pasta was overflowing, and as soon as I turned my head to look, I realized the cranberries for a sauce that I was making were starting to burst as the heat was much too high, leaving cranberry pops all over our entire kitchen. With each pop of the cranberries came a massive lava-like explosion of bright red, sure to stain cranberry juice, reaching as high as my ceilings. And of course, I had just cleaned my house the day before. I rushed to turn off the stove, covered my ears from the blaring smoke alarm, and fell to my knees in the cranberry explosion on the floor. I cried and cried, and I began to feel the weight of becoming a new mom, along with everything else crash down around me, in my pile of cranberries and tears. As I laid on the floor and sobbed, I began to wonder, how would I ever be able to take care of a child in the midst of all my mess? After what seemed to be forever, the smoke finally cleared, and I looked up to notice my dog Zoe licking the cranberries off the cabinets. And I noticed that she too was covered in cranberry sauce, and I just began to laugh. My feelings of being completely overwhelmed turned around in a second with a good dose of laughter, and my perspective on the whole situation had changed.
If you find yourself being tempted to get takeout for lunch, think again. You can make this 15-minute chicken and broccoli dish with just 6 ingredients in less than 15 minutes right at home. Let me show you how I made it. I started by mixing the ingredients for the sauce together in a small bowl or mason jar. For the sauce, you'll need 1/3 cup of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of honey, 1/2 teaspoon of dried ginger, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. I whisked everything together for the sauce until it was well combined. Spray the skillet with cooking spray and add 1 pound of boneless, skinless chicken breasts that have been diced into bite-sized pieces. Once the chicken is cooked through, I added the sauce to the pan and cooked for an additional 1 to 2 minutes or until the sauce was thickened. I stirred the steamed broccoli in with the chicken and sauce and served over cooked rice or quinoa.
Keeping meals both healthy and simple is easier than you may think. Wash and cut your produce when you unload your groceries. Have a few go-to freezer meals and snacks prepared. Find a few go-to easy breakfast ideas that you really enjoy. The start of the day can often be one of the busiest, and having something to fuel our bodies is incredibly important. Coming up next, now that we have breakfast and lunch taken care of, let's think about dinner. What about pizza and chocolate chip cookies for dessert? Of course, with a healthy spin. Keeping it simple with 6 ingredients or less.
So I'm making a full day's worth of meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even dessert, all with 6 ingredients or less. And my sister Emily is here joining me today, and we're gonna be making dinner together. It's a 6-ingredient spaghetti squash pizza bake. Now, if you've never used spaghetti squash, now is the perfect time to learn because we're gonna be starting from the very scratch of the spaghetti squash and showing you exactly what we did. So basically, I'm gonna have you put this into a bowl, but I'm gonna tell you what I did first. I just simply pierced it with a knife a few times, stuck it in the microwave, easy, 5 to 10 minutes until it's soft. And then when you can see that the strands are kind of soft and loose, then you know that it's done. So you can cut it in half, let it cool a bit, and then Emily, I'm gonna have you take the seeds out and put the seeds into a discard bowl.
Sure.
And then you can add the actual strands into a large bowl.
Perfect.
Along with 2 eggs.
Okay.
So that's what I'll have you do, and I'm gonna get started on the sausage pizza part of this. So I have just a 1-pound package of chicken sausage. You can use any kind of sausage you like. There are tons of different varieties. I chose a sweet Italian chicken sausage because it pairs perfectly with this recipe. And I'm gonna turn my heat up to medium-high. I'm gonna spray the pan and just get it kind of lightly browned. Then I'm gonna add just a few more ingredients. So here's what we have for our 6-ingredient dinner. We have some marinara sauce. We have 1.5 cups of marinara sauce, and then just 1 teaspoon of basil, and then 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. And then we have the sausage, the spaghetti squash, and the eggs. And remember I said that seasonings don't count. So really this is just our bonus, our basil. Now you could also season the sausage with a little bit of salt and pepper if it's not already seasoned, but this is already pre-seasoned sausage, so it's good to go. So Emily, have you ever, I know you've cooked with the spaghetti squash, but
I love it.
Did you feel intimidated by them at first when you saw them in the grocery store?
Yeah, because they seemed unusual
Just this big, hard
huge and
vegetable, and you're not really sure what to do with it. But now that you know how easy they are.
I love it. I actually love to keep one in my cupboard because they last so long.
Yeah.
And so it's like if I have nothing in my, ready for dinner, it's so easy for me to throw this with some ground turkey and some sauce and easily make some alternative to spaghetti.
Yeah. And even if you don't do something like a spaghetti squash bake like we're making today, with the eggs and everything else, it's just simple to cook a spaghetti squash up. Cook up some ground meat and some sauce and eat it just like you would pasta. So you can see just by looking at it that it looks almost like it's spaghetti in the bowl. So it really is a great pasta alternative, and I use it all the time. In fact, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll make some kind of meat sauce And then for Maddie and Sean, they like brown rice noodles, so I'll serve the sauce over those. And then I'll make for myself just one small spaghetti squash. So what we did is we did 2 small spaghetti squash. They're about the size of my hand, but if you have a bigger one, you just need 1 large spaghetti squash. So it's kind of dependent on what they have in stock at the grocery store. So I'm just gonna finish browning up the sausage. It's looking good. You wanna let it kind of cook for a minute without touching it. And it's looking good here. I added the oregano, and like I said, here you could also season the sausage with a little bit of salt, pepper, garlic powder if you'd like to, if it doesn't have some flavors added. And really, you could skip this step altogether. The chicken sausage is cooked already, but I like to brown it just a little to bring out the flavor.
And you can replace it with really any kind of meat, right?
Yeah. You could do shredded chicken that's already pre-cooked if you have some left over from a recipe. You could do ground beef, ground turkey, ground chicken. And then I'm gonna add my sauce and my Parmesan cheese because the chicken sausage is nicely browned. And you just added the 2 eggs, so that's looking good.
This is so easy. I could easily do this.
And what are some other really quick go-to meals that you have at home?
Well, we love to do breakfast for dinner because we usually have pancake batter on hand at all times and eggs. So that's a favorite of ours. And then also homemade pizzas, which we just use like pre-made crust or flatbread, which we usually have. We usually have some cheese and sauce. So those are our quick go-tos if I don't really have time to cook.
And another great thing about doing anything that's a bake or a casserole is you can make it ahead of time and it tastes great all week. So, you know, you could do double this recipe and do it in a 9x13 pan, and then that way you can have it for the whole week, if it lasts that long in your house. So now, because we have eggs in here, what I'll want to do is just add, do you have a big spoon over there?
Yeah,
you
let me grab
one? Just add like 1 spoonful first to the egg mixture, and that way you're not gonna cook the eggs really quickly, which would give you scrambled eggs. So just 1 small scoop of the hot mixture, and then another scoop, and then we can add the rest. So what this is it's called tempering. So it's just bringing up the egg temperature in this batter slowly so that we don't get scrambled
Makes
eggs.
sense. That'd be kind of gross.
Yeah. Scrambled eggs in a spaghetti squash bake with a pizza flavoring. That's a lot of combinations there. So then we'll go ahead and add the rest of it. And you can see how easy this was. It took us, what, 5 minutes to make?
Super
almost.
easy. All things you have on hand usually.
Yep. And what I love about having sausage on hand is that it's already pre-cooked most of the time. So it's already ready to go, and you just throw it into a recipe. So I'll have you stir that up. It doesn't have to be perfectly stirred up either. Then I sprayed an 8x8 baking pan with cooking spray. And so then we're just gonna add it to the pan, and then we're gonna bake it 425 degrees for about 30 minutes. You'll wanna check on it about 25, just see how it's looking. And really all you're looking for is that it kind of comes together almost like a lasagna. And you can top it with some more cheese, some pepperoni, some Parmesan cheese, anything you like before putting it in the oven, and that'll get nice and melted on top, just like a lasagna. So this is gonna kind of resemble the flavors of lasagna, and you see how simple and easy it was.
Have you ever felt that you've overcomplicated things in your relationship with God? For years, I thought everything had to fit into a perfect box or a formula where everything made sense. Yet God never seemed to fit into a box that I created for Him. After talking to one of my mentors, I was encouraged to make one simple decision that would change my walk with God forever. It was the decision to set my attention and affection, to seek to know Him more than anything. Finally and suddenly, it was more about Him and less about me. It didn't happen instantly, much like eating one healthy meal doesn't instantly change our bodies. But over time, I could see how my quest to pursue and know God was developing a closer walk with Him each day.
All right, so now we're gonna make a 5-ingredient chocolate chip cookie with a special ingredient that makes these really healthy and also over the top, moist and delicious. So Emily, I'm gonna have you add to the bowl just some applesauce, eggs, baking powder, salt, and chocolate chips, because of course we need that for chocolate chip cookies. And I'm gonna add the 2 dry ingredients to the bowl. So what I'm gonna add is our special ingredient, and it is 2 1/4 cup of almond flour. Now, what I love about almond flour is that it is truly a powerhouse nutrition flour. So this is not only healthy fats, but it also adds a ton of moisture. So it kind of replaces the need for adding oil or butter in a recipe. And then Emily, I'm having you add how much of each ingredient?
I did a 1/3 cup or a 1/2 cup of applesauce, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, which I know you always teach me that saltiness offsets
Balances
the
out
sweetness.
the sweet. Yep.
And we're gonna hold off on the chocolate chips, right? For now?
Yep, we
Okay.
can add those at the end.
Okay,
Kind
perfect.
of just stir them in at
And
the
then I
end.
did 1 egg.
All right, and then I'm gonna do 3/4 cup of monk fruit sweetener, but you can do any kind of sweetener you like. Now, what I like to use is monk fruit or stevia because they're both sweeteners that don't impact your blood sugar at all. They're also calorie-free and all natural. When it forms into a dough, just take a cookie scooper and scoop it up, and then you can just pop them out, and that way they're all the same size and they bake up perfectly. I find that a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going on a diet, and I've seen plenty of people say, you know, I'm going on a diet on Monday, and then by Thursday or Friday, they're off the diet. And why is that? It's because they feel deprived.
Yes.
And so if you tell yourself, I can't have chocolate chip cookies ever again because it's not healthy, well, eventually you're gonna eat a chocolate chip cookie again, and then you'll probably say, oh, well, I've blown it, and then you'll eat 5, maybe the whole pan, right? So instead, when you make a healthy form of chocolate chip cookies, because you see we didn't use any butter, any oil, no sugar in this recipe, just the natural sweetener, and then we used almond flour instead of white flour. So we're still getting our cookie fix here, and chocolate, because everybody needs a little bit of chocolate. So we're still getting our cookie fix, but in a much healthier way, so you don't feel deprived.
Can't leave this out.
Now, the one thing with almond flour and oat flour, whenever you bake with it and you're not adding butter, you're gonna find that your cookies won't spread and melt the same that a traditional cookie would. So I just usually give them a nice little pat down. You could leave them in those little ball shape, and that'll be fun to eat as well. But I like them to look a little bit more like a traditional cookie, so we're gonna kind of just flatten them out with our hands here. And you can see how simple and easy these are to make, and they are absolutely delicious. These are one of Maddie's favorite cookie recipes. So simple to make, you can make them with a 2-year-old. Let's pop these in the oven, 350 degrees for 20 minutes, and then we'll go check on our spaghetti squash bake, and we'll sit down and have a meal.
Sounds good.
With no kids.
Coming up next, 4 recipes with 6 ingredients or less. Can a healthy spin on pizza really be better than takeout? We can see all throughout the Gospels that Jesus invited the imperfect people to come and fellowship with him. Yet many times we try and run and hide when we recognize our imperfections. Even in the midst of our mess, he is calling us to come as we are, and it isn't until we come to him that we can truly be changed.
Well, Em, this was so fun to cook with you, and now we get to sit down and enjoy with no kids around.
A quiet meal.
What a blessing. This is a true gift.
It is.
And this just took 15 minutes to make.
So good.
Doesn't it look good? Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite quick go-to lunches because it's pretty much everything we love. Chicken, broccoli, it's like takeout, but 15 minutes. And, you know, there's nothing better than a quick meal, especially with little kids running around.
That's right.
So.
It's nice to have a hot meal, too. When you have kids, that doesn't come around that often.
That's true, but
Yeah.
you have to try one of these cookies that we made.
Okay. Oh, these look so good.
Almond flour, so they taste like almost like a nutty chocolate chip cookie. So good. And so easy to make. So for more really simple recipes just like these, you can head over to dashingdish.com where you'll find recipes and more to nourish your body and soul.